Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. We got our second new face on the podcast, Nick Sisson of N2 Media, fellow high school sports broadcaster and now a journalist for the daily news down in the Cowlitz County area. So, Nick, appreciate you hopping on in this kind of niche sport episode of the podcast this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really grateful for the opportunity to come and regurgitate all my knowledge, we'll say. I don't know if I have much of it, but I mean, there might be more regurgitation than knowledge, but it's great to be able to do it with you.
And already the first time regurgitation has ever been used on the podcast. So you're already bringing something new to the table. We appreciate it.
Yep, something new is what I'm all about, obviously.
All right, we're going to talk about the UFC. Nick, you and I are both massive UFC fans. Again, I wouldn't call us experts by any means necessary, but it is a great time to be really not just a UFC fan, but a combat sports fan. We're recording this on Tuesday. There's a pretty big fight in Japan this morning. I don't know if you watched it, so I'm not going to spoil anything for you. Massive knockout. There's a big boxing fight this Saturday. But there's so many great UFC fights coming up. So we're going to look at 6 of them. We did have 7 on the list I had initially, but the Israel Adesanya fight is kind of up in the air with what's going on about that. Is it going to be Strickland or is it going to be Duplessis? We just don't know right now. Yeah, so we're going to start with...
We can still talk that. Yeah, we can still maybe talk about that situation. It's not a fight that's like concrete, but neither is, one of the other ones that we're talking about here coming up.
True.
So, I'll save that for when we get to that fight. And I'm confident in saying that, by the way. But yeah, I think that Adesanya is ready to fight. Not quite sure if the projected opponent is, but I don't think that that's necessarily like indicative against Duplessis in a way that people should be like giving him a hard time saying he's not ready to fight or he doesn't want the fight. I think that that's completely ludicrous and not true. And I think that there's a good process that contender should go through before they take that next step and get their first title opportunity, because it's a big opportunity. I mean, seen plenty of guys throughout the course of history get that first title shot and lose, and then come on back and take care of business their next 2 or 3 fights, and then boom, they find themselves right back in the championship matchup and they come away with the victory. So the opportunity to learn in the right scenario for Duplessis, and if somebody else jumps him, so be it. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be the reasons why most fans are saying is that he's afraid of him. I don't think that's true at all. So
yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. I'm glad, because I've got some thoughts on that fight actually, and potentially that substitute is going to step in and fight Izzy. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's talk about the fight we know is going down. Hopefully, I mean, we're only a few days away from this fight. Dustin Poirier taking on Justin Gaethje, the rematch. These two fought quite a while ago, all the way back in April of 2018. Dustin got the win by TKO. It was really leg kicks that did Gaethje in that fight, which is kind of ironic since that's what he's known for, are his leg kicks. Both these guys have fought 5 times since the calendar turned to 2020. Only 1 loss for Dustin. That was that submission loss to Charles Oliveira for the title. Bounced back with a big submission win over Michael Chandler in his last fight. Justin Gaethje, 3-2 since the beginning of 2020, had that loss to Khabib, bounced back with a big win over Chandler, then lost to Charles Oliveira in what was a title fight for him, but not for Oliveira due to Charles missing weight, and then it bounced back with a big majority decision win over Rafael Fiziev. Nick, this fight's super interesting for so many reasons. First of all, we know we're going to get a fight of the night candidate. It's just what it's going to be. These two guys like to go to war, kind of have that healthy respect for one another, not a ton of trash talk. I mean, we got a belt on the line, the BMF title, vacated by Jorge Masvidal, if you want to say that. This fight's going to be absolutely insane. How do you see it playing out?
Well, in terms of predicting a winner of the fights, I have a hard time going against Dustin Poirier here. I think that overall, I think Dustin's resume is just slightly more complete than Gaethje, but that's not to say that Gaethje doesn't have the capabilities of winning the fight. How it plays out, I think that there's going to be a large amount of stand-up in this fight. I don't see this fight going to the ground very often. Gaethje may have the initial takedown advantage. I think that he would have the ability to get the fight to the ground more, but I do think that Poirier is a little bit better overall when he's on the ground, when he's on his back, and being able to kind of wiggle out of position and get the fight back to his feet. Gaethje's cardio, I think, is going to be slightly less than what you might see from Dustin overall, and both of these guys are heavy hitters. But I think Poirier is just a little bit more calculated in his approach. I think that he's not the kind of guy who's going to risk gassing himself out for an early finish in this one. Same can be said for Gaethje in a little bit, but Gaethje has the tendencies to, once he's connected once or twice early in a fight, he starts getting that sense that he's going to go in there and look for the kill. Also, Gaethje's a guy who has been able to take a lot of shots in his career. He's able to trade back and forth. If you go back to that Chandler fight, him and Chandler put on one of the best, shows ever, but I think that overall, if you look at how the guys have played out in similar matchups, they've both fought Oliveira, they've both fought Chandler. I mean, these guys have had a lot of similarities in their careers up to this point. I just like the fact that Poirier is just slightly more calculated in his approach. The way he got Chandler out of the fight, and not just winning a decision over Chandler, it leads me to believe that Dustin is able to get the fight done. And I'm not saying that Gaethje didn't look good against Fiziev. I think that he looked pretty good overall. I think Fiziev won one of those rounds definitively in that fight, and that, Gaethje, there was a little bit of question mark if he was going to get the decision ultimately. But Fiziev is an up-and-coming guy. I mean, that was a big fight for him more than I think it was for Gaethje, and kudos to Gaethje for taking it. But after the fight, you got the sense that Gaethje is a little bit on the fence about how much further he wants to go in the UFC. I haven't heard a lot of rumblings from Poirier's side that he's ready to throw down the gloves, so to speak, and go out on top. I think Dustin's got, a couple more opportunities for him, obviously, depending on what happens with one of the guys we're going to talk about, in a potential matchup. I mean, there's another huge money opportunity for him before he ends up throwing his gloves down. But Gaethje gave the sense that this is it. If Gaethje doesn't win this fight, I'll predict it right here, right now. I think he retires. I don't think that he has the desire to go late into his 30s. I think he's 35 right now. I don't think he has the desire to go much later in his career to try to recover another title run. Now, it's for the BMF belt, whatever that means. I don't know. It means you're a BMF, I guess. But winning it does put him on track to possibly get a title fight again. And I think he would be the next in line. Dustin as well, kind of in that same conversation. However, a lot is going to depend on what happens with Oliveira as well, and to see how they continue on down the road with Makhachev and what kind of potential matchup. I hate both those matchups, by the way, for both Gaethje and for Poirier.
Yeah.
I think that they're very much deserving of a title shot, and I think that if it's presented to them, they should go for it. Gaethje, definitely. I think Dustin can hold off on a title shot against either of those two guys and maybe wait for a different fight if it's available, but we'll see. What about you? What do you think about it?
I mean, I love this fight. Obviously, this is going to be an absolute war. I think you hit the nail right on the head when you talk about Gaethje and the questions regarding how much longer he's going to be going in his career. This dude has been through so many absolute wars. You go back to his World Series of Fighting days. There were some nasty fights. I mean, that Luis Palomino fight, he took a beating as well, even though he ended up walking away with the win. He's fought nothing but killers for the last decade. However, Dustin, when it seems to me that Dustin does have a little bit more of a weakness on the ground, I think that comes down to Gaethje's takedown defense. I don't think Gaethje is going to try and exploit the maybe grappling weakness. Weakness isn't a fair term, but I just can't come up with a better word to describe that for Dustin. Gaethje's not the guy who's going to try and expose that. He's going to stand toe-to-toe with Dustin. He wants to prove that the first time, hey, it was the leg kicks. He's not going to let Dustin chew his legs up like that again. That's what Justin's known for. So we will see if Gaethje ever does decide to go for a takedown. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to see Dustin's chin really, really get tested. Obviously, he's going to have to eat some shots. Does Justin have the power, the one-punch power to knock out Dustin? Absolutely. He can knock out anyone in the weight class. I agree with you, though. I'm going Dustin Poirier to pull off the win. I think you nailed it as well. We talked about how calculated he is. He's not going to go out there and just swing for the fences. He's going to get a feel for what Justin wants to do, and he's going to adapt from that. It's what he does. He's a very, very smart fighter. I think he's as driven as ever to try and finally get that lightweight title around his waist. Those wins over Conor, I think, kind of reset his focus a little bit into, okay, I beat Conor. I've got the money. Now it's time to go get that title. Couldn't get the job done against Oliveira. I agree that that's a horrible matchup. We'll talk about those two guys here. But I think Dustin gets the win. It wouldn't surprise me if this fight went all 5 rounds, just because that's how tough both these guys are. So it sounds like we're both on Team Poirier for the first fight, although you're going to want to watch that fight. It is going to be a fight of the year contender for sure. Let's move to a different title fight. This is for an actual title. We're going to talk about the bantamweight title fight coming up. Aljamain Sterling against the Sugar Show, Sean O'Malley. Now, you and I have talked about O'Malley's last fight with Peter Yan. I think Yan won the fight personally. I really think that he just O'Malley controlled the tempo of the fight. Yan is going through a lot of changes. I think people are kind of overlooking Yan a little bit now. But man, Nick, this is your typical grappler versus striker matchup. Aljamain Sterling has looked damn good as of late since winning that title. He has been on a tear. Sean O'Malley's a different animal, though. Sean's only loss was due to an injury. Do you think he gets another one, or do you think we hear and new from Bruce Buffer?
Styles make fights, and I think that O'Malley's style does not suit him very well in this matchup. I mean, Aljamain is not only a great wrestler, he's also got a very high fight IQ. He's not going to put himself in tremendous danger in front of O'Malley. It's the type of fight to where O'Malley can't afford to just try to walk him down either, because it's going to cause him to get off balance on his front foot. He's a guy who kind of likes to stand back and then kind of jump in there, switch stance a lot. Those aren't things that you can do in front of a, Olympic style wrestler that we got in Aljamain Sterling. Now, part of the problem with me and Aljamain Sterling is I've got the fight against Peter Yan burnt into my head from when he got dominated, and the illegal knee basically, just kind of damned Peter Yan. And he's been cursed pretty much ever since then. I mean, he's been going through it, because if you think about where Yan was at, even before that fight, I mean, he completely destroyed Jose Aldo. And Aldo has actually looked pretty good since getting beat almost to death by Yan in that fight. And I think that fight just put him on a completely different trajectory. I'm going to be honest with you, Matt. I am not a fan of this fight at this junction for Sean O'Malley. I just talked about a little bit ago about how you want to set yourself up in that first title fight to be in a pretty good position to win. I'm not saying that Sean O'Malley can't win the fight. I'm just saying that this fight has 5 rounds of frustration written all over it. And you saw the body control that Aljamain Sterling demonstrates when he fought Henry Cejudo, when he's fought Petr Yan. I mean, he gets you into that body triangle from behind, and he'll sit there all fight. He will hold you in that position. He will not allow a guy with a skinny frame like O'Malley to wiggle free of that position. He will gladly stack up round after round after round. I mean, I'm thinking this fight's like 49-46 unanimous decision Sterling. It's not to say that O'Malley can't do something, but I don't see Sterling putting himself in that position to take it. And we know how good his cardio is. How good is Sean O'Malley's patience? How good is his takedown defense? How can he control his frustrations if he does find himself on his back the first 2 rounds of the fight down to love? I mean, what is he going to be able to do to adjust to the champion Aljamain Sterling? This fight to me shouldn't even have been made. Dvalishvili should be the guy fighting Aljamain Sterling, but those two guys love each other so much that they are not willing to fight one another. And Uncle Dana needs to figure out a way to do something like that, because if you look at how Dvalishvili did against Petr Yan, and you look and see how O'Malley did, it's clear. I mean, it's clear as day that Dvalishvili should be in the fight. He fought the next guy right below that tier a lot better. And I'm with you. I thought O'Malley lost that fight. I thought Yan won it 2-1. This is a situation to me, though. I'll tell you this much. And I'm not going to get controversial here against the UFC and their judging, right? I know the UFC doesn't quote like control their judging, all right? But ever since that they were purchased by the WWE, company, there's been some weird stuff, some judges' decisions that have got me going, and then you got like these prearranged call outs, guys going into the ring, and O'Malley was the guy who was the recipient of the very first, fight after the company. I can't remember the company's name, but then once they took over the UFC, he comes in after Cejudo gets beat. I mean, they just completely disregarded Henry Cejudo, a guy who'd been on the shelf for 4 years. I mean, they basically didn't even let him get on the mic until O'Malley came in and had to stare down with Aljamain. This is just a manufactured fight to me. If it's close, I could see anything happening. I could see O'Malley getting a decision just like they did with Jan, because they want to set O'Malley up. He's a guy who can draw a gate. He's a guy who can draw a ticket. But I don't think he gets the fight here. I think it's 49-46 unanimous decision. I'll give O'Malley a round. Davishvili's the real guy. It won't happen. It should happen. And if it is not close, I don't know how O'Malley gets back there so quickly.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't like this fight yet. I think O'Malley, Jan's the only real guy. He fought Munoz. That was a no contest. Yeah, he's probably winning that fight. But other than that, he hasn't really fought anyone. He fought Vera. That was when he had that injury that handed him the loss. We didn't really get to see how that one was going to conclude. I don't think the judges are needed for this fight. I think Aljamain Sterling retains. I think he submits him. I don't think Sean O'Malley is the number 2 contender. I don't think he'd necessarily be the 3 contender or the 4 contender. I think you got Corey Sandhagen and Umar Nurmagomedov right there. I know Umar just hurt his shoulder, so he's going to be out for a little bit of time. I look back to that Aljo fight with Corey Sandhagen. Sandhagen was just on that meteoric rise. Aljo thought he was being overlooked again for a title shot. He ran over Corey Sandhagen in about 90 seconds and submitted him. And Corey is a much better grappler than Sean O'Malley is. O'Malley's not going to be able to keep Aljo off of him. I don't think he's going to be able to catch Aljo and knock him out. Aljo's been knocked out once in his career, is by a vicious knee from Marlon Moraes, who's got just otherworldly power for a bantamweight, just retired. Congratulations on a great career for him. But I just think Aljo is going to run him over and submit him round 2 or 3. I think you kind of tease it a little bit. O'Malley hasn't been dragged into the deep water yet. That Jan fight is about it. That's the only time he's really had to dig deep and get tested. Aljo, he's a different kind of guy when he drags you into the deep water. He doesn't just let you drown. He drags you to the bottom of the ocean and leaves you there. That's what he's going to do to O'Malley. I think the judges can just sit back and relax, enjoy the fight, because I think Aljo gets that submission win, which I think in the long term is good for O'Malley. It'll teach him that, hey, you've got plenty of things to work on. Got to work on the grappling, especially in a division like the bantamweight division. You're not going to be able to go out there and just have slugfest with dudes. They're going to find out, hey, this guy can't wrestle. He can't grapple. And they're going to take you down. They're going to beat you up. It's just the facts of the game. You got to at least be okay at everything, or you at least have to have great takedown defense like Justin Gaethje, who we just talked about, to keep the fight standing if that's your strength. I think this is a bad fight for Sean O'Malley. I think it's terrible. I think Aljo runs him over. And I think that you're going to see Nurmagomedov be the guy who kind of rattles things when it comes to the Sterling and Dvalishvili. I think that he comes in, runs over both of them, and all of a sudden both of them want to fight for the title. But guess what? That dude is an absolute killer that I think it'll just be a matter of time before he's on top of the bantamweight division.
I would put my money on Davishvili in a fight with Aljamain Sterling. After seeing
absolutely.
After seeing how he fought against Jan the last time that he fought him, just recently, there's a reason why this guy's called the Machine, man. He had a 25-minute gas tank that, I think he had the most takedowns in the division. During that fight, he is absolutely nonstop. And he trains with the champion. There's a reason why the champion doesn't want to fight him. And it ain't because that they're best friends. It's because he knows that he's a guy who could test him. He knows that he's a guy who could go into those deep waters And Dvalishvili's not a guy who's going to win by knockout. Those two guys stylistically, they mirror one another so well. It's just going to be a big 25-minute grappling match, and that's what Aljamain Sterling wants to avoid. I mean, his management team has done a great job of isolating O'Malley as a contender. Matt, let me ask you a question. Off the top of your head, can you remember the last time that a guy who was ranked outside the top 5 got catapulted into a championship fight coming off of a split decision win where he looked like he was so nervous that he was even going to get the decision? I've never heard of it.
No, never happened. Not to my recollection.
I mean, I cannot justify for the life of me how O'Malley provided that definitive performance that's going to catapult you into a title fight. You remember the Conor McGregor-Chad Mendes fight? That was a fight for an interim championship there to get to Aldo, essentially. And Mendes was a guy who had supreme grappling, supreme wrestling, and he actually got Conor down in the first round and put him on his back. But McGregor had all those tools, right? I mean, O'Malley's got the stand-up game that McGregor, but McGregor also had the ability to defend a takedown. He sent Mendes to the floor with seconds to go in the second round. It was a definitive, I'm the guy, I'm ready to go. I got the interim belt on me. Let's go fight Jose Aldo. And it was billed as probably the biggest fight in history up until that point. I'm not sad it lasted, 13 seconds. It's the way it goes. But at the same time, it's like, there was legitimacy behind Conor McGregor's rise. Did he get some Dennis Sievers in the way? Yeah, he did. But he also fought a guy who was very, very highly ranked and highly respected in Mendes, and he put him out. So I just don't have the faith in O'Malley here. This is probably the most undeserving title fight I've ever seen.
Yeah, the only one I put above this was a fluke title shot, Joe Soto, back when he fought TJ Dillashaw. Fight probably should have never happened, but he saved the card, I guess. So we'll move on from the bantamweights. Let's go back to lightweights. We kind of teased talking about this fight a little bit earlier. Islam Makhachev against Charles Oliveira, the rematch between these two. Makhachev lost his second fight, I believe, in the UFC, was knocked out. The name of the guy who knocked him out escapes me right now. Since then, dude's been on just an absolute tear. I believe he's won now 12 in a row, has kind of just dominated he's dominated everyone from Dan Hooker to Bobby Green, Charles Oliveira to win the title, and he retained the title in an absolute war against Alexander Volkanovski. He kind of didn't even feel like it felt to me like Makhachev didn't believe Oliveira was ready for this title shot. He was looking to go up and fight Leon Edwards for the welterweight title. But I mean, Oliveira, there's nothing past him. I mean, who else do you want to give Makhachev for this lightweight title fight? Oliveira got that massive win over Beneil Dariush and looked damn good doing it. His 20th finish in the UFC. Part of me questions Charles Oliveira, his mentality after winning the lightweight title. I mean, you go from missing weight against Justin Gaethje to then fighting Islam Makhachev, and he did not look good against Islam necessarily in that fight. He didn't look like Charles Oliveira, I should say. I think this one goes a little bit different. I think Islam needs to not overlook Oliveira, because otherwise Oliveira might get his neck. I still personally think Islam gets the win. I just think he's a monster right now. This Russian wave of talent coming over into the UFC is unbelievable right now. And I just think he's the newest one. I think he beats Oliveira in the rematch. I think it's another finish a little bit later in the fight when he's able to gas Oliveira maybe a little bit more. But man, it's a fight Islam can't overlook.
No, I love this fight. This is a fight that I think is perfect to make again. I think Oliveira has done a lot since the loss as well. And the way that he was able to just, win his last fight against Beneil, that was a guy who, I mean, he had a gripe. He had a gripe for a chance at a title shot. I mean, I think that him and Oliveira was a great fight to make with one another, because, we've seen Oliveira take on champion after champion, guys that, have been in contention. He's taken on, the Dustin Poiriers and beat him. He's taken on Gaethje and beat him. I mean, I love what Charles Oliveira is all about, but I go back to your comment just a little bit ago here. I don't think Oliveira was like in the right frame of mind or had the right game plan. It's hard to look at that fight the first time against Makhachev and say, man, this just doesn't feel like a Charles Oliveira fight. And the other thing is too, is that I don't, again, with the game plan, I don't know if Oliveira felt that Makhachev was able to compete with him on a stand-up level, right? He took some shots from Islam in that fight. He got dropped. I mean, we see that a lot in the fights that Oliveira gets in because he wants to drag you to the ground. I personally think that 75% of the shots that Oliveira takes aren't necessarily the type of shots that really rock him and really put him down. I think he plays a lot of possum in his fights to get guys to get on top of him. So he's in position to get into the guard and get into his Brazilian jiu-jitsu. A lot of Royce Gracie, just a bigger man when it comes to Oliveira. But I'm with you a little. I want to be a contrarian here and I want to pick Oliveira to win, right? I do. But if you go to the history of the Dagestanis who have come over to the UFC, you know, they have probably become the most feared countrymen fighters outside of Brazilians, you know. And I mean, I know that the Mexico's had a run of champions lately. I know that Africa, whatever you want to, you know, whatever allegiance you want to go with Adesanya, with Ngannou, with Usman, they've all had their runs here. But I think the Dagestanis have really taken over the wrestling side of the UFC and the ground control portion of the UFC. I think that Islam's wrestling is so good and that he's so disciplined, being mentored under Khabib, that he's able to do enough on the ground to avoid the BJJ of Oliveira. I think it's a third round finish here for Makhachev. I think that he gets a submission victory over Oliveira. I'd be surprised if this one goes all five. Oliveira's fights hardly ever go the distance. He's usually the one stopping them. But Makhachev is the type of guy who will take advantage of one mistake, and I think that Oliveira has a propensity to make more mistakes. Going back to the fight, though, that Makhachev just had against Volkanovski, hard for me to get it out of my head that he ended that fight on his back, eating shots against a guy. But I think that Volkanovski is a legit pound for pound number one guy. But Makhachev is going to be better off having fought Volkanovski and taking on his pedigree of stand-up and ground game and wrestling. So I like Makhachev again to win this one. I think it's closer. I think Oliveira will look a little bit better in this one. But I am with you in terms of him taking on a championship fight with the level of commitment and dedication that he should going into it. Bronx is a great fighter, man. It's hard for me to bet against him. I mean, he has the most finishes in his division's history. I mean, he's amazing. It's hard to bet against him. I think Makhachev is in his prime, and I don't see him losing in this one again. And I think it's time for Oliveira's, hoorah to finally end.
So we're both in agreement once again. I hope we'll have a difference of opinion in one of these fights. Maybe it'll be this one. We got a heavyweight title fight that was just kind of announced officially. John Jones will make his first defense of the heavyweight title against Stipe Miocic. I for one, don't think this is going to be John Jones' swan song. I don't think he's going to be quite done in the UFC. I know a lot of people are saying he's going to retire in New York, go out. But, man, then he was talking about he wants to fight Tom Aspinall. He seemed to be interested in that fight. I think he wants to take out Sergey Pavlovich. I think that he wants to fight as a heavyweight champion and see if anyone can beat him. Because if he cleans out the heavyweight division, there's no argument that he's the pound-for-pound greatest fighter we've ever seen. Now he's got some out of the cage issues, obviously. No matter what you think of John Jones outside of the cage, he's incredible inside of it. Stipe is a guy who's now in his 40s. How much does he have left in the tank, I think, is going to end up being the question. Because remember, he wasn't just fighting, he was also a firefighter during his rise to becoming the heavyweight champion. He had the trilogy with Daniel Cormier where he actually won 2 out of 3, looked really, really good in doing so, but then got ran over by that guy named Francis Ngannou, which you can't really knock him for anything there. My issue with Stipe in this fight is that first fight with Ngannou, he used his wrestling. Is that wrestling good enough to beat John Jones? I don't think it is. His boxing, fantastic, really, really good boxing. But again, how much do you have left in the tank? We saw John Jones kind of just run over Cyril Gane to win that heavyweight title. I don't think he'll win this one quite as easily, but I think it's going to be very similar. I think John Jones is just too good right now. I still think he's got a lot left in the tank, and I can't say the same about Stipe. Stipe, fantastic run. I think this is his swan song. I think he won't fight again after this one, but I see John Jones finishing it in the early rounds.
Yeah, Stipe would fight again if he wins.
Yeah,
I don't see him retiring if he wins the fight. I just don't see him winning the fight. I hate agreeing all the time, but you and I have talked a lot, off this, podcast here about John Jones and his career. I mean, I don't understand how anybody could make an argument against him being the greatest of all time. I really don't. I don't care what's happened outside of the ring. In fact, I think it magnifies his dominance in the ring even more. The only problem is the only argument that people can really make, which is true, I'm not going to deny it, is that the involvement of PEDs, right? Giving him an unfair advantage inside of the octagon when he's there. You take out all the riffraff with the law, the speeding, the whatever it is, right? You take all that out. I mean, that's a layoff. That's ring rust. That's an opportunity to not go back in and look your sharpest. That's the opportunity to go in and your mind's not quite focused on the task at hand. John Jones has never had a problem with that. I mean, he's been in some wars a couple of times. I think that the Gustafsson fight in their first fight was probably his closest fight that he's ever been in. I actually think that the Thiago Santos fight was also very close. That one probably wasn't his best showing, and if I remember correctly, I think that was the last fight that he had before he vacated the title, right?
He had Dominic Reyes after.
Okay,
he also didn't look great.
Right. I couldn't remember if he fought Reyes before that one or not, but yeah, I think that he has done enough to cement himself as the GOAT. My biggest problem with this fight here is just how long of a layoff that it's really been for Stipe and the age that he is at. I mean, Jones isn't much younger, but he's taken more time off in between his fights, and I've never seen him lose. I mean, just look at the two fights that he fought against Cormier when Cormier was in his prime. John Jones wasn't losing those fights to Daniel Cormier. Stipe, he did lose to Cormier. An eye poke kind of had a little bit to do with it, I think. But I mean, yeah, if you're going to compare Stipe to Cyril Gane, I think that Stipe wins in that category. I think that his ground game and his takedown defense is a lot better than Cyril Gane. I think Gane's stand up, an ability to dance around and not engage is a little bit better if you want to give that a categorical advantage of some kind. But I just don't see Jones having as easy of a time with Stipe. But at the same time, if the fight is on its feet the entire time, Jones has just got too much with his legs that he can work in. He's got such an advantage using his feet in this fight. He's got those teep kicks that are going to find Stipe's kneecap all fight long. I just don't see Stipe being able to pull it inside and get into the dirty boxing range comfortably that he wants without sacrificing his gas tank early in the fight. And if this fight goes a little bit later, I think Jones would end up getting on him and end up finishing the fight, whether it's by TKO, whether it's by rear naked choke. I mean, Jones is going to win the fight. If you want to talk about who's next in line, I think it's Pavlovich personally. I think Aspinall has done a good job of proving that he's a guy who could go in and knock you out. But man, come on, the guys that he's knocking out, no offense, I mean, they're not at the level of the top four in the heavyweight division. Aspinall needs to fight a guy like Sergey Pavlovich, honestly, to cement himself as a real contender. He's one fight off of an 11-month layoff. Yes, he just dominated with a knockout win over Tiberian, but still, at the end of the day, I mean, he's still at least a fight against Pavlovich away, maybe two fights away before he's a real contender. I don't know if Jones stays around long enough for him to fight him.
I love that call out that Aspinall had of the winner of Gane and Spivak. That's going to be coming up in Paris before too long. I think that's a great next fight for him. If you win that one impressively, then I think he will get an opportunity at a potential John Jones if John Jones is still around. So once again, we're in agreement with John Jones there. Let's move into one that is this fight official? Is it going to happen? There's a little bit of question marks going on. Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor is one. I mean, they're coaching on The Ultimate Fighter. I don't know if you've been watching that. It's kind of been a one-sided affair for the most part there. Neither of these guys really have blown me away in recent years, but they're big draws. Michael Chandler puts on exciting fights, and Conor McGregor is like no other we've ever seen in the sport. McGregor's lost 3 of his last 4, the only win over Donald Cerrone. In fact, as of right now, Conor McGregor only has 1 win over a guy who's currently on the, or excuse me, 2 wins over guys who are currently on the UFC roster. Dustin Poirier back at featherweight, and Max Holloway before Max Holloway really went on his run. Michael Chandler, though, hasn't looked much better. He's also lost 3 of his last 4 with that 1 win coming against what is left of Tony Ferguson. The big question, what it all comes down to in this fight for me, is can Conor survive the initial onslaught from Michael Chandler? If he can, I think Conor wins later in the rounds. I think he's going to end up piecing Chandler apart. Chandler has not shown the capability of, utilize or saving his gas for the later rounds. It's, I've got him hurt. I've got to finish this now. Do you think McGregor can survive that initial onslaught?
I mean, hypothetically, no, I don't. I think Conor McGregor has won his last fight in the UFC. I don't think Conor McGregor wins another fight in the UFC. I don't even know if Conor McGregor fights another fight in the UFC. I think that this entire marketing plan of getting him into this contender, Ultimate Fighter thing is just, meant to do what it's doing, float you and give you something to watch on ESPN Plus or something. I think that Michael Chandler wins that fight. And the reason I say that is, McGregor is all about trying to provide everybody with the most watchable event possible. I'm not saying that Michael Chandler is not the most watchable event. I think that he is very much in the top 3 opportunities for McGregor. McGregor's biggest opportunity for him is to figure out a way that he can get with Poirier one more time. I understand that the fans probably would think that fight's a little bit diluted since it would be their 4th, but I disagree. I think I think you have to take the rubber match out, and you have to kind of look at the broken leg as kind of a fluke. But at the same token, it's like, how much does Conor McGregor really have left in the tank? You mentioned the Donald Cerrone fight. I mean, that was as staged of a staged fight as you could possibly get. I mean, the ball of your shoulder, your trap, basically, it knocks out Cerrone. I mean, Cerrone's pretty much on record as saying, I was just there, for a paycheck. I didn't think I was going to win. I wanted to. I mean, Donald Cerrone's mom or grandma or something came into the fight and hugged McGregor after. Thank you so much for beating my son here. I mean, we are set for life. I don't take Conor McGregor seriously anymore. The fact that he's not in USADA protocol right now leads me to believe the fight's never going to happen. I think Chandler is wise to sign a fight with somebody else if Dana lets him, because I think Chandler still has a lot of opportunity. If you go back to the fight that he had against Oliveira a couple of years ago, Chandler, I think, had that fight won. The gas tank was the only thing that really ran him out of that fight, was because, he connected with Oliveira, and then Oliveira ends up getting him. And if you look at what Chandler did to Tony Ferguson, I mean, that's still an impressive finish to me. Ferguson had never been completely, knocked out ever. And Chandler just straight rearranged his face with his foot. I just don't see Conor McGregor winning another fight. I just don't. I mean, I don't think his body is able to do it. He's moved up. He's moved down. He's moved outside of the UFC, to do boxing. I mean, to me, he's just an attraction at this point. I mean, what Khabib did to him ended up basically doing in his career, in my estimation. And Cerrone wasn't a serious fighter. I mean, I don't think Conor McGregor wins a trilogy fight with Nate Diaz. And I know Nate's not under contract anymore, but if you look at the matchups that are available for Conor McGregor, this one doesn't do a lot for me. I mean, I think Chandler ends up beating him personally. He's got more wrestling. He's got the ability to put him out. We've seen McGregor go out. We've seen him get tapped out. I mean, McGregor was all kind of fluff to me. He was all just a big hype show. Once the hype show ended, his career ended.
Now, I'm with you. Everything in me says Michael Chandler's going to win this fight, except for this feeling I have in my gut. I've had this feeling only a couple other times. I had it when Fabricio Verdun beat Cain Velasquez in Mexico City, and I had it the day of Juliana Pena upsetting Amanda Nunes. I've got this feeling Conor McGregor's going to win this fight. I don't know what it is, but I have a feeling it's going to be first or second round TKO. You nailed it. Everything you said was completely true. I don't even know if this fight's going to happen. But something in my gut just tells me Conor McGregor's going to land that shot that puts Michael Chandler out. I get Michael Chandler's tough as they come. His chin is incredible. We saw that in the fight with Justin Gaethje. How he didn't go out there is beyond me. I'll never be able to fully comprehend it. But McGregor's just got this knack of finding the button. When he knocked out Jose Aldo, I mean, all of us were just baffled. We never seen Aldo look like that. We never seen Aldo go out like that, obviously. So yeah, for some reason, I'm picking Conor McGregor to win the fight. I can't tell you why. I can't really even wrap my own head around it. I just have a feeling Conor McGregor is going to pull out this win. It's going to be that left hand. If this happens for a third time, I'm going to start taking my money to the casino when I have this feeling in my gut. But I can't go against it when it's happened twice. I think it's a big opportunity for both these guys. Obviously, it's a big opportunity for Michael Chandler to fight that big name. Chandler had some incredible fights back in Bellator with Patricio Pitbull, with Eddie Alvarez, with Will Brooks. It's his chance to finally get on that big stage where he's fighting Conor McGregor, because Conor McGregor brings in an audience that doesn't really watch MMA when it's not Conor McGregor fighting. This could be Conor's last fight regardless, win or lose. I think it wouldn't surprise me either way to see him walk away, go out and to his own ventures, maybe go box. I don't know what's next for Conor McGregor. I know we'll hear about it because that's the Conor McGregor brand of business, but I'm picking Conor to win the fight.
Well, boxing would make sense for Conor McGregor because it gives him the opportunity to continue the clown show build up to his fights and make money.
There you go.
You know, honestly, I mean, I think he loses and he goes and fights Jake Paul or something like that, you know? And I know that people are like, why would he fight Jake Paul? Well, because people want to see Conor McGregor possibly knock him out. But at the same time, it's like both of those guys are good at promoting their fights and stage artisting, you know, the entire build up to it. I just don't take Conor McGregor seriously anymore. I think about a quote from Marvin Hagler. I don't know if you remember Marvelous Marvin Hagler, the boxer, but
yeah.
You know, one of his most famous quotes that he had was, "It's hard to wake up in silk bed sheets, you know, and go back to work," you know, basically signifying that you come from nothing. You've got the hunger, you've got the drive, you've got something to prove. Once you've gotten there, once you've made the money, you know, once you've got that comfort, it's hard to continue to come to work every day with the same work ethic, with the same desire to stay on top. McGregor is the red panty fight for a reason, man. I mean, he's got that. He's built it up. He's exited the UFC and taken on Floyd Mayweather. You know, he's made the boxing money. You know, he knows he's going to get what Nate Diaz is going to get, you know, a taste at making some money outside of the UFC that is going to be life altering, life changing. And then to go back into the fray in the octagon against a guy who's dangerous and Michael Chandler. I mean, make no mistake about it. I mean, he'll be prepared for this fight if it happens. He will be ready to go with something to prove. I just don't think that I see that in Conor McGregor anymore. Now, does he have the ability to hit him with his left hand and put him out? Sure. I mean, I think every fighter at this level has that ability. I just don't see this being a smooth transition for McGregor to get back into the ring and be competitive. Remember, I mean, this would be the first fight since breaking his leg. I just don't. Yeah. I like Chandler if it happens. That's just where I would go. And I don't think that McGregor wins another fight in the UFC. I'll stand behind it.
I respect it. I respect it. I should be picking the same. I don't know why I'm not. Let's move into the final fight we're going to talk about. This one, a welterweight title fight, which I think I'm not sure if it's been made official yet. Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. You want to talk about a guy that I don't believe deserves a title shot? We're talking about him, Colby Covington. This guy is worse at building fights than Conor McGregor, but he tries to do it the same way. I can't stand this dude. I'm going to put it out there. I don't like him one bit. Leon Edwards impressed me in his last 2 fights to dig deep against Kamaru Usman when you've been absolutely dominated. He was dominated for 24 minutes of that fight. And all it took was that one head kick to turn Usman's lights out. And then he looked damn good in the rematch where he actually won a decision. And I think it's a decision I 100% agreed with. He looked really, really good. Now, was that because he was fighting at home, or was that he's made some improvements? I don't know, but I don't think it matters. I think Colby Covington's wrestling is about all he has anymore. But man, the layoffs, he just doesn't fight. He does not fight. Leon Edwards is getting better each and every time we see him. Sure, he's had some lucky wins. I think Nate Diaz probably should have finished him when they fought instead of talking trash and showboating, doing what he does. And then Kamaru Usman should have beat him in that first fight. That should not have been a win for Leon Edwards. Kamaru Usman should have still held on to that championship. There wouldn't have been a rematch. But here we are. Leon Edwards earned it. I think he beats Colby Covington and hopefully shuts Colby Covington up forever, although I doubt it.
I mean, I don't hate Covington as much as you do, it sounds like. I mean, I think that he's done a good job of remaining in the conversation. And I think that when you are a hated fighter because of, you know, how you promote your fights and how you go about your business, I think it does add to the attention of the fight itself, because there's going to be a contingency of people that want to see you lose. They want to see you get knocked out. They want to see you get shut up. We haven't seen Covington get starched yet. You know, we haven't seen a guy go out there and just turn his lights out, really. And Covington's fought guys. I mean, as much as people, you know, want to knock on Colby Covington, I mean, he's fought guys. I mean, he fought Masvidal, although I think Masvidal was starting to be a little bit more on the downside of his career. And I thought I thought stylistically that was a bad fight for Jorge, because I didn't think Jorge had really a lot to gain in that fight. I mean, I get that he had the opportunity to turn his lights out and shut him up, and that there was the betrayal aspect of them being friends and roommates and such. But Covington's done a good job of at least being competitive in his fights against Usman. I don't think that he necessarily got cheated like he suggested when he got finished in the fight against Usman, but I mean, I think he made it competitive. And I get it that he's got the MAGA thing going behind him that, you know, people hate, you know, and his Brazilian call out when he got himself kind of in position. I don't think that there's a big buildup though between these two guys. I think that this is more of a manufactured buildup between these two. I don't think that you could really look at either fighter and say that, you know, they truly hate each other or that they have any real, you know, disdain for one another. I think Edwards is going to have to fight some guys that probably aren't going to be really on paper deserving of a title shot, because I think Khamzat's ultimately the guy that, you know, should probably be in line to get a title shot sooner rather than later, unless you want to throw Bilal into that conversation. I think Bilal is very much deserving of doing it. But Covington, like you said, he's been laid off. He's been taking his time. I mean, you know, I'm gonna bring up a guy like Robbie Lawler. We just saw Robbie Lawler go out on a shield and knock out a dude to end his career. I mean, he dominated Covington. He dominated Lawler 5-0 in their fight a couple years back. I mean, I think that Covington is kind of like the guy that you have to put in there. Gilbert Burns was ranked number 3 when he fought Khamzat and he got beat. It was a close fight. I think that it was a lot closer than what people think. I thought it could go either way. I thought Burns did enough to kind of not derail the hype train, but slow it down a little bit with Khamzat. And that's probably the only reason, honestly, that we're in this position. Does that mean that this fight is intriguing to me? Not really. I think Edwards, having beaten Usman both times, and Covington having lost to him both times in their fights, I think it kind of tells the story about how this one goes. Leon is much more dangerous on his feet. Covington has no chance of finishing him on a stand-up game. The only chance that Covington really has is winning a decision, and I don't see that going in his favor here. I think that Covington is peaked, and I think that Edwards, having overcome that 24 minutes that you were talking about. Although I do think the first round was won by Edwards in that first fight against Usman. I mean, off of an Usman mistake, you know, Edwards controlled him for that entire first round. But after that, once the second, third, fourth round, and then all the way up to the halfway point in the fifth round, I think Usman did more than enough to show that he was a better fighter. And I think the location of the last fight between the two had a lot to do with Edwards' performance, having fighting in the O2 in England. So I don't know. I think Edwards wins this fight. I would say a decision win. I'd say something like 48-47. I think it'd be a close fight, but I'd go Edwards in this fight. But I think Bilal is probably the guy who's got the most gripe to get here. And I think Edwards holds the strap for a couple fights.
And we'll see. Hamzat goes back to welterweight. He just signed on to fight Paulo Costa at middleweight. So is he even going to be back down at welterweight? Who knows? I think Burns is also a guy you got to keep your eye on for getting a potential title shot. He's an absolute monster as well. So very quickly, let's talk about this Israel Adesanya thing real quick. He wants to fight in New Zealand, I think is what it really comes down to. He wants to fight close to home. That's, I think, the only reason he's ready to go. He's going to take this fight with Sean Strickland, I believe, is who it's going to end up being. Sean Strickland is not a guy who's going to say no to a title fight. It doesn't matter what he's doing. That fight's going to happen. Very, very quickly, I think Izzy wins that fight. I don't think there's a current middleweight, except for maybe Hamzat, that can beat Israel Adesanya. Duplessis, I think, is a monster. I was very impressed. I did not think he was beating Robert Whittaker. I thought Whittaker was going to win that fight for sure. Really starched Whittaker, looked damn good doing it. I think this dude has shown that it's not just because he's got beef with the champ that he's getting this push. I think he's really, really good. Although when they do fight, I think Izzy's just on another level right now.
I mean, it's a dangerous fight for Izzy, no doubt. And there's some things about this that are very strategic by Izzy and his camp, knowing that Duplessis is coming off of a quick fight and, they do the build-up thing after the fight. They throw in the whole African angle and stuff. I mean, I think it's all comedic, to be completely honest with you. I don't think that it really shows that these guys have like true hatred or disdain for one another. I think Duplessis can win the fight. I really do. I would give him a real opportunity to beat Adesanya. But I think that there's some gamesmanship here by Adesanya and his camp, knowing that it would be a real quick turnaround for Duplessis to get in there. And I think that they look better by saying, yeah, we're ready to go. Let's fight it. New Zealand. Yeah. I mean, Duplessis made it sound like that he was ready to go to New Zealand to do the fight right away. I mean, if his management team is smart, like it looks like they are, I don't think that you rush into that fight for the title, especially coming off of a big win like that over Robert. I thought Duplessis could win the fight against Robert. I figured that Robert would fight it a little bit smarter and try to use his gas tank a little bit more for, getting into the later parts of the fight. But we've seen some fights with Duplessis to this point here to where it looks like he's in trouble early in the fight, and then all of a sudden he comes out and he just rocks you and uses that power that he's got. And I think Whittaker's turned himself into like the gatekeeper of the middleweight position all of a sudden. I mean, I don't know if he ever gets himself back into the conversation, but Strickland, he's a name that's going to generate some views. And I think that that's the best thing for Adesanya, is to get a guy who can be watchable and unlikable as well. I think both those guys are very unlikable. It's almost a shame that Pereira is moving up to light heavyweight to take on Blachowicz here, because it kind of ends that intrigue in the Israel Adesanya chapter. I mean, Adesanya is the type of guy who wants to have the John Jones recognition. I mean, that would be a fight that would be intriguing to me, is if Adesanya took on John Jones. I think that those guys have got that playful back and forth with one another that, could generate a very, very watchable fight. I'm not saying that Strickland's not a watchable fight. I just don't think that he's done enough to get there. And I think Adesanya would pick Strickland apart. And I think his kickboxing background would be the main reason for that. I think that he would work the legs a lot, and I think he would make it very uncomfortable for Strickland. And I don't think Strickland's nearly as complete of a fighter. So, I mean, if Adesanya does get that fight, and if that ends up being it, I think Adesanya wins it easily. I'd like to see both these guys wait a little bit longer to be like a first of the year January type fight between Adesanya and Duplessis. I'd like them both to continue the layoff. I get why Adesanya would want to get back in there though right away, because he looks good by saying I'm ready to go. And if the fight doesn't happen, he's got the ability to get out on social media and be like, hey, look, this guy told me that he wanted to fight. I told him, let's fight. He doesn't want to fight. Obviously he's afraid of me, but I don't want to throw off the trajectory of both of these guys, because if Adesanya gets back out there without Duplessis, that Drakus is going to get a fight a month or two after. And then, but I don't see that Drakus needs one. I think that he's in the Colby Covington position. I think he can sit back and wait 6 months, 9 months, and he would still be the guy ready to go.
Yeah, I think he's in a better spot than Colby Covington, honestly, because I don't think there's anyone who's really closing in on a middleweight title shot other than Strickland, who Driku is definitely way ahead of in terms of that conversation. So there's some great fights coming. Of course, there's also a great boxing fight, Terrence Crawford against Errol Spence Jr. I'll tell everyone, Terrence Crawford, I think, is the best fighter in the world right now. I think he wins that fight. That is such a great fight, though. I love that guys are starting to actually fight. You got a quick pick for that one?
Oh, Crawford. Bud's going to get that one done. I think Bud Crawford is like really got a chance to be considered one of the best fighters of all time, really. I mean, and it's hard to imagine that boxing has fallen so far off of the hype train of the guys that are really good to where people know how good Terrence Crawford really is, but he is so damn good. If Mayweather was 10 years younger and they fought at this junction in their career, I think Crawford would finish Floyd Mayweather. I think he's better than Floyd at this point in his career where Floyd was. And I mean, that's no disrespect to Floyd Mayweather and his resume. I mean, a lot of people hate on him, but I mean, he fought dude after dude after dude. Terrence Crawford has also fought dude after dude after dude, and he's had no problems to this point. I think Errol Spence is a great competitor, and I think that he's a dangerous guy. I think Bud gets it by 10th round TKO.
Really good fights coming up.